Another thing that will get you kicked off retail shelves is not understanding your own brand's identity, not understanding your own brand's performance, not caring about your brand's performance. Again, it is not the retail buyer's job to manage your brand for you. And this means freedom, self-awareness, expression. And this to me means you can be more than one thing. I'm Jasmine Bowdry, and you're listening to And This Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of And This. And today's episode is super special. For those of you that might be considering taking your product business to the next level and thinking about getting into mass retail, this is going to be super helpful for you. Luckily, I am a former corporate retail buyer. And so my degree was in retail buying and merchandising. I have been a former buyer for some of the world's largest retail companies. And so you are in the hands of an expert. So I'm going to give you the real of what buyers are thinking, what they're potentially going to ask, and how you can position yourself and your business to even prepare for mass retail. Or after this episode, you might determine I need to stay D2C, which is direct to consumer. So just a quick little overview of the overall retail landscape as it is today in 2024. Retail growth is up. Year over year, it's up probably about 3.5%, which is the typical industry average standard. However, there are small pockets of specific categories that are performing better than others. So we're seeing beauty perform better. We're seeing automobile and gas perform better. We're seeing grocery and foods perform better. But some of those other categories like clothing and things that may not necessarily be considered essential are starting to see a bit of a decline. And so I just wanted to give you that for context in case you are in any of those categories with your product-based business, that you aren't thinking that, hey, it's something I'm doing wrong, something's happening. Overall, it's probably just the industry in the current landscape of retail. When we think about retail, there are different types of retail formats. So there is mass retail, which would be your Walmarts, Targets of the world. You know, those are considered mass/big box. There are specialty retailers, which is like a Nordstrom. And then you have luxury retailers, which is like Saks, and then some of your specialty boutiques. You have luxury retailers like your Saks, Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf's, things like that. So there are different types of retail formats within the entire retail landscape. And so when you are considering mass retail or thinking about mass retail, you are going to have to work with what is called a retail buyer. The retail buyer is the decision maker of that particular category. So somewhere in a fancy corporate office, there is a team of retail buyers, and they are the ones that are making the decision on the price, product, placement, and performance of items that are in your current favorite retail stores. So that is the job of a retail buyer. And that is what my job was for over a decade. The retail buyers are the decision makers. It's important to understand this because you need to understand what they're looking for, how they're thinking about their business, how they're thinking about growing their business. The retail buyer is responsible for the P&L, the profit and loss of that particular category. And then that rolls up into a total company number that then gets reported out. And so they have shareholders that they need to answer to. They have, big bosses that they need to answer to. And so when they are thinking about what products and what brands are going to satisfy a gap in my current product assortment, that's where you come in. And so some things you want to think about when it comes to mass retail is, what is your overall vision as a product brand? Is your overall vision to eventually exit, get acquired, or sell? Because if it is, and you're a product-based business specifically, chances are you're going to need to go the retail route, the mass retail route, in order to get a higher valuation with your acquisition. Those are just the facts. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be an e-commerce only brand that does not get acquired or eventually exits. However, we have brands like Mael Organics, Shea Moisture, Bevel, Honey Pot, Drunk Elephant, and a slew of others that have made multi-millions from exiting their product business. And they did that because they were in retail. They were across several different retail distribution. They were across several different retailers and expanded their distribution. So when you're thinking about your overall vision, and if you have a number in mind, and if that's a high number, then going through retail is probably the route you're going to have to take. And so you want to think about that. You want to think, is going into retail something that aligns with the goals that you have for your business? If it is not, if you're like, hey, I just want to stay small, I'm not trying to sell, I'm not trying to get acquired, or whatever the case may be, then this particular way to go about expanding your business may not be what's best for you. But before I talk about how you get your products on shelves, I want you to ask yourself a few questions to really determine and do a self-assessment on if your business is ready for big box. First question is, can you fulfill a purchase order on time? Meaning, after you've had a conversation with a retail buyer, which typically goes through a process that's called a line review. And this is where they are evaluating, they're meeting with you, they're talking numbers, and they're making a decision on if your product is going to go onto their shelves. Then you actually have to fulfill your commitment. And so when they send that purchase order, can you fulfill it on time? Meaning, if Target successfully accepts you after their line review and they say, hey, now I want 50,000 units of your product and we need it by X amount of time, can you send that to them on time? Because what happens if you're late comes with a hefty fine. Not only that, you are risking your chances to stay on shelves, because we don't just want to get on retail shelves. We want to actually stay on retail shelves. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, can I fulfill a big purchase order in a timely manner? Another question I want you to ask yourself is if your current business cash flow allows for you to operate and sustain for the next 3, 6, or 9 months. So how much money, what is your run rate? How much money do you have that is going to allow your business to continue to operate successfully for the next 3, 6, or 9 months? And you might be wondering, why does she care about our cash flow? She's not an accountant. No, I am not. However, when it comes to your cash flow and going into retail, you are not going to get paid from a retail company immediately. They have terms that are going to be negotiated within the contract, and some of them are pretty strict and you are not able to change. And typically those are the payment terms, which is net 60 at a minimum, if you're lucky. But typically it's going to be around net 90 and sometimes net 180. This means that either after the purchase order is placed or after the purchase order is fulfilled, meaning that you have now shipped your products and they have successfully arrived to that retailer's distribution center. Now they will pay you after 90 days or after 180 days. It really depends on the contract and what's in the agreement in the terms of when they're actually going to pay you. If it's going to be once the 90 days from when the purchase order is placed, or 90 days after it hits their actual distribution center. Typically, it's 90 days after it hits their distribution center because they want to make sure that you actually have shipped and fulfilled the product. So think about that. If you don't get this $500,000 PO, this $50,000 PO, this $1 million PO, can your business sustain? Or is it going to tank you because now you've taken everything you've had in order to actually fulfill this purchase order to get into retail? So that is why understanding your cash flow is important. Next, you want to think about, does your price point fit within that specific retailer? And so if you are more of a premium brand and you are selling beauty products that begin at a price point of $39.99 and up, then your product probably doesn't fit within a Walmart that is all about value and being lower price. On the flip side, if your product is something that is at a lower price point, then perhaps a Sephora is not the retailer that you need to be trying to position yourself with. So make sure that you understand the price points of the various retailers. What I see so many product brands do is try to pitch to every single retailer to get their product in wherever they can. And then it's a disconnect because their product either doesn't fit within that retailer, or they're discouraged because the buyer didn't accept their product, but it's because you as a brand founder didn't do your proper research on the price points of that particular retailer.
Are you a product-based business owner that's ready to scale? I've compiled my industry experience and knowledge into bite-sized resources that you can access anytime, anywhere at jasmineboundary.shop. You'll get actionable insight, advanced strategies, and in-depth knowledge on how to grow your product-based business. Visit jasmineboundary.shop today and let's take your brand to the next level. Now, back to the episode.
Next, you want to think about, how is your brand going to stand out on shelf? So you are used to running your brand on .com. People can come to your website. They can scroll the pictures. They can read the product descriptions. But when someone is walking down the aisle, you only have a few seconds in which they want to make a purchase decision. So you need to think about your packaging. And I'm not saying as a founder, you need to come out the gate with premium packaging that is going to cost you an arm and a leg that you can't even get on shelves because you spent so much on packaging. However, you do need to think about, what are some ways that you can actually stand out? What are some things that you can add to your packaging that are going to educate the consumer, that's going to want to make them pick up the package, read more about you, read more about your brand, what you sell, what you offer, that's then going to drive them to adding that product to their cart. Last, you want to think about, how can you actually drive traffic to a retail store? So when you're going into mass retail, it is not solely on the buyers nor the company's marketing team to drive traffic to the stores to sell your product. This is why it's important to build your community so that you can already have loyal customers ready to go into stores, shop, and sell the shelves out, so that you can prove that your brand should be positioned in retail. You can prove that it does need to stay on shelves because people love to buy, shop, and support from you. So you need to think about, how are you going to drive traffic into stores? Some things you may want to think about is, how can we drive in-store activations? What are some pop-ups that we can do with, local customers that love and support our brand, that are then going to go into that local retail store to shop? How can you get out in front of some of your customers in these retail stores? Can you use geo-targeted ads to drive traffic to a particular retail store? So you want to start just thinking about, how if I were to get my brand into the number one retailer on my list, how am I going to drive my customers off of my website to get them to go into the store to purchase? So now that we got some of the basics out of the way, let's talk about how you actually get your products on shelves. If you are fortunate enough to have a conversation with a retail buyer and invite it to a line review and ask to be a part of the assortment, then you need to consider sometimes the shelf space cost. So think about when you're walking down an aisle at your favorite retailer. You see that there are different brands that are placed on different levels of the shelves. That is intentional. Every brand wants eye level placement, right? Because as you're going into a retail store, something that catches you right at eye level, you are probably more likely to pick up and read and purchase. However, If you are at the bottom shelves and you have to look down, then chances are a person isn't going to see you. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, because the big brands pay for that placement. They pay for that shelf space. And so let's say you are successful in the line review and you go into a store and you see your product is on the bottom 2 shelves. It doesn't mean that you're performing bad, but it should also be an indicator of how can I improve productivity of my products so that I can either go wider with my assortment, meaning that I can go across the shelf, or I can go up another level in the shelf. You also want to prepare for your product's performance. According to the National Retail Federation, about 80 to 90% of product brands that go into retail fail. I don't want that to be you. I want you to have longevity in retail. When buyers are having conversations with brands, they're looking for partners. They're looking for brands that are going to bring innovation. They're looking for brands that are going to bring something new and different that is a current gap in their product assortment. And so when they're partnering with you, they're not thinking, this is an item that I'm going to bring in today and kick out tomorrow. However, we do see it happen. And so again, going back to how can I drive traffic to the store? How can I work with influencers that can talk about this particular retailer that's going to then drive traffic to the store, or online? Can we do branding online? Can we get web banners? Can we do shelf talkers and different things to educate on shelf that is going to help the consumer purchase our product? You also don't want to expand into retail too quickly, meaning that if you are having a conversation with a few different retail companies and several of them want you, don't feel like you have to diversify your portfolio immediately. If you're just starting out, I would say work with one retail company for the first 12 to 24 months. See how they operate. Learn the business of retail and then think about expanding into wider distribution. You also want to think about diversifying your product assortment. So your product assortment is the actual products that you sell. So if you are a skincare brand, then your product assortment may consist of a skin cleanser, a skin moisturizer, a skin serum, things like that, right? And so when you're thinking about diversifying your product portfolio, this is something that buyers are going to want to know. What else are you bringing to the market? So we brought in your cleanser and we brought in your moisturizer. What do you have coming down your product pipeline? Are you launching a new SKU that has some new innovative technology that you've researched? So you want to start thinking about, what does my product mix look like? What am I going to be adding to my product assortment in the next 2 to 3 years? And have that in mind, because that is how you expand across the shelf. If you only have 2 SKUs to offer, you will only ever get 2 SKUs. So you want to think about, when you're going into retail, how am I actually going to expand in retail? So here's the thing, guys. I mentioned that 80 to 90% of brands that go into retail fail. And so in order for you to avoid that, I want to equip you with some common mistakes that a lot of brands make when they're going into retail. Some of the things that get brands kicked out is not shipping on time. If your products are late, and of course we understand things happen, especially if you manufacture overseas, right? But you having a late product means that the product is going to be late to the shelf, which means that that retailer cannot sell it at the time that they planned, because it's not just about your product not being on shelves. Retailers have specific reset times, meaning that they have specific time frames in which they are able to add and reset stores. It's called a planogram. And so when a store is trying to reset a POG or planogram, they can only do that within a certain time frame. And so if your brand misses that POG date, that you are going to get hit with a fine, potentially based on however long you're late. So the fine could just continue to increase based on the delay. It also puts a very bad taste in the buyer's mouth. You want to be on the good side of retail buyers. You want them to consider you for opportunities. You want them to think of you as a partner. You know what? Jasmine's brand is performing exceptionally well on shelves. Consumers are loving it. Her social media presence is amazing. She's driving traffic online and in store. I would love to consider her brand for an incremental end cap placement during the holiday season. That's how you want buyers to think about your brand. Not, you know what? I can't even consider Jasmine's brand for an incremental end cap holiday opportunity because Jasmine's brand doesn't ship on time. Another thing that will get you kicked off retail shelves is not understanding your own brand's identity, not understanding your own brand's performance, not caring about your brand's performance. Again, it is not the retail buyer's job to manage your brand for you. So you should be coming to that retailer with new ideas. You should be coming to that retailer having frequent conversations as often as they will actually communicate. But you should be having frequent conversations on ways you can partner, ways you can grow, ways you can do things online, things that you're trying, things that you're doing that's going to help elevate and position your brand, especially if you're a new brand in the store. If you're considering going into mass retail, I have a gift for you. It is a free checklist called Before the Pitch. And this is to prepare you before you even try to have a conversation with the retail buyer, things that you need to already have in place, things that you need to think about. And it's a super quick checklist, but very detailed that you can go through and download for free. The link will be in the show notes. So make sure that you grab that if you're thinking about going into mass retail. So I hope that this episode was helpful to you guys. I hope that you took notes. Please come back and refer to this if you are ever having retailer conversations, if you ever need to understand, hey, what are some things that I need to think about and consider? Is my brand actually even ready for mass retail? Because at the end of the day, the opportunities are endless. Once you get into mass retail, chances are you can get into more retailers, but you want to do it right. You want to do it strategically. I've seen so many brands that me as a buyer, I've had to kick off shelves because they either couldn't fulfill, they grew too quickly and couldn't keep up with the expanded distribution, or they just were a horrible brand partner. But again, this is all up to you and your vision. You do not have to go into retail to be successful as a product-based business owner. You do not have to sell your company to be successful. Like, these are all just opportunities in different ways to think about expanding should you choose to. But there is no right or wrong when it comes to retail. Personally, do I think that going into retail is a smart move for a product-based business owner? Absolutely. Because I've seen several product-based businesses leave lasting legacies by going into retail. Like, their products are going to be on shelves for years to come based on how they position themselves as not only founders, but as brand partners, as category disruptors, and innovators and leaders. I hope that this was helpful to you. If you're a product-based business owner, you're a current entrepreneur, you're considering going into the product-based business industry, I hope that this was helpful. I will see you guys on another episode of And This.
Ready to revamp your style but not sure where to start? Join my weekly newsletter for exclusive styling hacks, hot fashion tea, and essential wardrobe tips to simplify your daily dressing routine. You'll also get my free wardrobe essentials checklist packed with timeless pieces that will elevate your look and make everyday dressing a breeze. Visit the link in the show notes to get your weekly dose of style secrets and grab your free checklist, and let's reinvent your wardrobe today.